We have over 20 years combined experience working both with and for Microsoft. We focus on digital transformation using the Microsoft 365 platform, which consists of Teams, Microsoft Work Management, and the Power Platform. And since we've started, our focus has always been on customer success. We always want to be that trusted advisor for you guys, and our job is to extend that Microsoft solution to enable a better experience for you, the end user. So once again, thanks for joining. I'm going to hand this over to Neil so we can get the demo started for you.
All right. Hello, everybody. So Neil Alcott, I'm a senior solutions architect here at Marquee 360, and I'm going to walk you guys through Power Automate, give you a quick demo of it. So the whole idea with Power Automate is to give you a platform so that you can automate different tasks. Anything that's kind of repetitive, anything that might require some kind of an approval. And it's a really powerful platform, and to be honest, it's my favorite part of the Microsoft Power Platform. It's has a lot of capabilities, and it's pretty exciting. So if I geek out on you a little bit here, it's because I really do enjoy this. So I'm just going to jump right to a demo. So let me share my screen. Let me know if you guys can see.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. So best way to show this to you guys is to just do a demo of it real quick. So with Power Automate, if you go to flow.microsoft.com, you'll get to a screen where you can then sign in. Also, if you go to the waffle menu, you'll see Power Automate here as an option. And when you go into that, you'll land at this screen here. So this is basically where you would monitor and build your different flows in Power Automate. Now, with Power Automate, there's some fundamental things to understand. One is, as you're building these workflows, they're called flows. And when you're building those, the fundamental pieces of it are going to be these different connectors. So a connector, when I click on connectors here, you can see all the different connectors. The connectors basically define what are the triggers and what are the actions that you can do with that particular application. So as you can imagine, all the Microsoft services are included in your default connectors. But what's really nice about Power Automate is it's not limited just to Microsoft technologies. It's opened up to and includes a lot of connectors to other services as well. And I believe they're at 300 or more currently, and there's constantly other connectors being added. So for example, when I go into here and I scroll down, you can see all the different types of connectors that are available. And as I mentioned, it's not just Microsoft. So if you're connecting, say, the Salesforce, if you spell it correctly, there you go. So if I can search here for whatever application I might want to connect to, in this case, you can see the Salesforce connector. Maybe you're trying to connect to Oracle, so you have like Oracle database connector. Really pretty much anything you can imagine, there's probably a connector for it. Now you'll notice on some of the connectors, it doesn't say premium. And on others, it does. Can we mute everybody? Thanks. The main difference here, if you see premium or not, is if it doesn't have a premium connector designation, means it's basically included in your basic Office 365 licensing. So if you have like an E3 or an E5 license, you can use that connector free of charge. If it says premium, then you do have to go up to one of the Power Automate licensing tiers or one of the Power Apps licensing tiers. And I'm not going to go over all the licensing because that would be another 1 hour conversation. But just keep in mind, that's really what this is designating. If you see premium, then you have to have one of those other licensing tiers. Okay. So as I mentioned, you have hundreds of connectors that you can choose from, and then each connector defines what triggers you can have and also what actions can you take. And the easiest way to describe that is to do an actual demonstration. So what I did here is in Teams, actually, let me go into my Microsoft team real quick. I created a Microsoft team for this webinar, and then in that team, I created some list. So in this case, I have a created content request list, and then I also have a Microsoft Planner plan where we would add tasks that, what someone has to create some creative content. This is where they would see what they're supposed to be working on. So if I had a manual process, it may be something like this, where I create a new item. It's called marketing content, put in a quick description. Who's the requester? So I'm just going to say it's me. What type of media is it going to be? So let's say it's going to be video. Who's it going to be assigned to? So I'm going to assign it to Aaron. And then I have a status. So maybe when I submit this, our manual process would be somebody would review this. Maybe they would go into here, approve it. They might reject it. They might say it's started, in progress, completed. All right, but that would all be a manual process. And then manually, they would come over here and they would create a task for, new marketing content. They'd set the due date, and then they would assign it to Aaron. Okay. So again, that would be the manual process. But with Power Automate, we could automate all of this. So when someone enters an item into here, it would send an approval out via email to whoever has to approve this. In their email, they could either approve it, they could reject it. Once they approve it, it automatically creates a task over on this planner board. All right, so we can use Power Automate to automate all this. So we'll have emails, we'll have SharePoint content, which is what we're seeing here. We'll have a planner task automatically created. So we're interacting with 3 different things. All right, so let's go into Flow or Power Automate. And what I'm going to do is create a flow. And when you create a flow, when you start from blank, there are several different variations that you can create. There's also templates. So Microsoft and some other vendors might have already created a similar process flow that you're looking for. So you can always search and look for those and be pre-built, and you just tweak it for what you need. In my case, I'm going to create an automated flow because I want whenever an item gets added to that list. So I'm going to say this is our content automation flow. And it's going to be based on a SharePoint trigger. So if I put SharePoint in here, it'll filter down to show me all the triggers that are available. So in this case, I want to say when an item is created. And this is an example of a trigger. All right, so whenever an item is created, it's going to trigger this flow. So first thing I'm going to do is specify the site address. So I'm going to use our Power Automate 101. And then there you can see that SharePoint list that we have. So once I have the trigger, what do I want it to do? So here, when the first time something gets created, I want to go through and start an approval process. So if I go into here, I could either search and browse and find a connector. Again, there's 300 or so different connectors. But what's a lot easier to do is just go into here and start typing some keywords, and you'll see there's an approvals action. And here I can create an approval, specify the approval type. So for the approval type, you could either do approve, reject, everyone must approve, so it has to be unanimous. You could also do first person to respond with approve or reject, that'll be the outcome. You can also do custom responses. So custom responses would be approve, reject, need more information, something else. Okay, defer it. In this case, I'm just going to do approve or reject first to respond. And I'm going to give it a title, so new content request submitted. And I could specify who it's going to be assigned to. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and assign it to me, but I could assign it to a whole group of individuals. And then in the details, this is where in the email content, we could display information. So this is a good example where I might have, the title, I might have, the description, and then maybe it's the media type. And what's nice with Flow is any action, sorry, I'm losing my voice. Any action that was already completed in the Flow, down here you'll see what's called dynamic content. So when an item got created, we can actually pull properties from that item. So in my email for the approval here, if I want to display the title, I can click on that and it's going to display it in my email body. And then for description, and then same thing for media type. So there's our media type value. Okay, so all the properties related to that item that started the flow is now available. I could also include a link to the item. Again, if you go into here, you'll see. Now, as you can see, sometimes these lists are pretty long, so you can actually search. You could say link, and there's link to item. And then also you can give a description, which I'm just going to use the title. So that'll be a user-friendly description for that. All right. So one thing that I do when I'm building flows is I tend to do a lot of testing with it, and it has a really nice testing capability here. So if I go into here, you'll see this test option, and you could either test it manually, meaning, basically you'll trigger it, or automatically. And if it ran any previous time, you could reuse whatever triggered it earlier. In this case, I'm going to say manually, and you'll see the screen will flip here into kind of a debug mode. And now I can go in, and if I create a new item, and we'll say this is photography, and I'm just going to go ahead and save it. And you should see it kick off the flow here. So it just got triggered, and now it's creating an approval. Now with the approval, if I go to my email here.
Hey, Neil, we had a question come up.
Yep.
Can we create a customized condition as a trigger and not pick from what's in the selection list?
It's way beyond, that's not a Power Automate 101, but yeah, you can have custom connectors. You can also do your own like HTTP. If you have like an API for a particular app, you could do something like that. So here you can see there's our approval email. You can see that dynamic content. Now, I would probably format this a little better, but you get the idea. I only had 30 minutes. I'm doing a quick one here. And if I go back to, you can see here, it created the approval. And if I go into the details of any of this, I can see exactly, either who it sent it to, or maybe what the outcome was. So if I go back to here in my email, I could go ahead and approve it, put in some comments, and then submit it. And then depending on your flow, we'd be able to pick up what was the outcome of that particular approval and then do more actions. So that's what we want to do here, right? So we're going to go back in here. We're going to edit this. And then I'm going to go in and put a control in, and it's going to be a condition. So I'm going to basically say if So now you can see the dynamic content for the approval. If the outcome hold on, I'm not seeing it. All right. Okay, I am not seeing the outcome. So hold on. Actually, I know what I did wrong. I used the wrong approval. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to start and wait for an approval.
Anyway, we had another question come in while we're waiting. How can we send the approval to a manager of a person who created a list item?
If you have that information in your Office 365 directory, we could do lookups against that. There's an Office 365 connector. So I'm going to paste that back in there, and then we have our link to item, and then title again. All right. So now let's go down here, see if we have our response or outcome. There it is. So we want to have our outcome. So if the outcome is equal to approve, just double check this real quick. Approved. I'm glad I checked. See, so it needs to be approved. So if it's approved, we're going to do this branch. It'll be a yes. If it's not, then it would go down this branch. So if it was rejected or some other state. All right. So what I'm going to do here is if it's approved, we're going to want to set the status of that item to approved, but then we're also going to create the item over in the planner, the task over in planner. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the SharePoint connector. When I go into here, you can see all the actions that you can take for SharePoint content. And what we're going to do is update an item. Now, in this case, again, I'm going to pick our SharePoint site, pick our list. And you can see here it's asking for the ID. So what's the unique identifier of the item you want to update? Well, I want to grab the item that triggered it, right? So if I go back into here, you can see there's that dynamic content again. So it'll pick up the item. And then for the title, we're still going to use that. But for the outcome here, it's going to be approved. And I could also fill out other fields if I wanted to, but you get the idea. And then what I want to do next is once it's been approved, I want to create a task over in Planner. So if I go into here, you can see there's the Planner connector. And I want to create a task. So we should see our Power Automate 101. Or not. It's not seeing yet. All right, let's see. Yeah, it's not seeing it. Let's get rid of this. So when you see something that's in preview, it's kind of in beta mode right now. Microsoft's testing it. So it could be related to that. Let me search for planner again. And let's try the regular create a task. Still not seeing it. Let me try one other thing real quick. So some of what you're seeing here is one of the things with Power Automate is it tries to help you. You know, it tries to display what it can find, but there's times where, you know, you're just not seeing it. So one of the things that I could do, for example, here's that planner plan. You can see here where it's looking for the group ID and also the plan ID. So I can actually take this value, copy it, and put in custom value and just in that ID. And now you see how it sees it. So just quick little lesson learned there if you ever get stuck like that. Now you can see here I can also put in, you know, the assignment dates and things like that. I could also look up the who the assigned to should be. So going back to our SharePoint item, you know, you can do the assigned to email. We'll see if that works. So let's give this a try real quick. So again, I'm going to save it. And I'm going to do a test. Now, earlier I did that one run. So if I wanted to keep running it with that one particular item, I could just pick this. I don't have to create a new item. It'll just take that item that I already created and run it. In this case, I'm going to do it manually again. We'll go back to Teams. So I'm going to create a new item. We'll say this is social media. We're going to assign that to Josh or Jarrell, maybe. Yeah, we'll assign it to Jarrell. I'm going to go ahead and submit it. And I should get an email. So there's our email. I'm going to go ahead and approve it. Now, if we look at Power Automate, you can see here, you know, green check mark means it successfully completed that action. If you see a red checkbox or red X, basically means it ran into an issue there. And that's why this is really key when you're building these. Make sure you use this test mode because it really helps you troubleshoot and figure out exactly where it went wrong. If I expand this, you can see here. So it's kind of interesting. Even though I approved it, it's saying I didn't, which means it didn't execute these. So you see the red X's. And then it went down no, which I didn't have anything there. So let's go back. To here. Actually, sorry, let's go back to. See that? I had past tense. Now, this is where that using the prior runs can come into play, right? So I can go into here. Instead of making a whole nother one, I'm just going to use this last one that just ran a minute ago. Run it again. There's my email. I'm going to approve it. So you can see it just executed. Now it's true. It updated the item. So if we go back to our teams here, you can see it's approved now. And it says it successfully created the task. So if we look over here, we should see a task assigned to Jarrell. Voila. Okay. So, and I didn't specify a bucket, so that's why it's saying no bucket, but you know, if you had other buckets specified, you could specify that there. So, you know, kind of quick example of how you can use Flow to automate some of these different tasks. So what we did is we had a trigger that whenever an item gets put into this list, it creates an approval, sends it via email. If the outcome of that approval is approved, it then updates the status here. And then depending on who it's assigned to, it creates a task over in Planner. So we basically use 3 different connectors in that flow: SharePoint, approvals, and then Planner. And I'll open it up to some questions, if there are any. And this was a pretty, you know, I would say a basic flow. You can get into much more complex flows, as you can see, with some of the logic and branching off. And then if you incorporate other connectors, you know, it can get a little bit more complicated. If you don't see a connector for the system you're trying to connect to, one thing that you could do, and this gets, you know, this gets a little bit more technical, but one of the things that you can do, so for example, if I go down the next step here, type HTTP and you'll see these HTTP connectors. And basically that allows you to connect to an API on, you know, whatever that system is. So that system has an API that you can connect to and you can then make requests to. You can do that with this particular connector. Think of this as kind of a generic way of connecting Power Automate to other systems, but it has to have an API.
Neil, we just had a question come in. If you wanted to be able to provide reporting off the back of something like this, is the data stored as logs, or would you need to add a step to the flow to populate a table?
That's a good question. So I'm not aware, and I haven't really looked into it either. I mean, there are some analytics here. I'm not sure if Microsoft makes this available yet to Power BI. I would assume they are at some point. So you will have some analytics here. So for example, if I go to another flow, let's find one that I know. Like this one runs quite a bit. So this is using Power BI. So you will be able to get some idea of like how many times does it run, what's the usage, what are the errors. And this is all out of the box information. But you could also have some error checking and whatnot in the flow logic itself where you write it somewhere, you know, whether it's a SharePoint list, an Excel file, a, you know, comma delimited file, and then you'd be able to pick up that there. The other thing too is down below here, you will see the history of all the times that it ran. So if you see failures here, you can always open this up, and similar to the testing mode, this will show you more of a debug view of exactly what happened. So this is an example of a flow that's pretty complicated. And as I get down into it, it starts branching off. And it gets, more and more complicated. But again, depending on, the process you're trying to automate, you might have different switches or different conditions that are happening to execute your process.
And Neil, one last question. This is from Michelle. Follow up on her earlier question about the custom trigger. Does that require next level or premium access?
You do have to have premium, or whatever the licensing would be. So there's two different licenses. There's Power Automate per user, and then there's Power Automate per app. And then each one has different capabilities. But yeah, those custom connectors will be part of that.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone so much for coming today. We did put a link in the chat box for a survey. Be great if you guys could fill that out just to let us know how we're doing. Be on the lookout for our Power Automate 102 session, which is geared more towards advanced users. And as always, please look us up on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and join the chat. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.